Hey everybody, this is Sean.
This is Braden.
This is a quick ad here before we start our show. Yes, we got to pay the bills too, and we're fortunate to have a couple sponsors. And and one of them is a T-shirt giveaway from the Guitar Repair Center. This guy's the best. I've been using him for a long time. So go to our Facebook page, the Psychology of Lickage Facebook page. Go share and like the T-shirt giveaway post. And we're going to be announcing that in a couple weeks. And what's the other thing? We got a vintage and rare guitars that we're selling.
Yeah.
We've become brokers now. Yeah. So what's the guitar of the week? What's the one this week?
So the guitar of the week this week is the Homer Haynes limited edition Stratocaster, built in 1988, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's a run of 300, and it's almost got like a gold color to it.
Oh yeah, it's just beautiful. It's modeled around the 57 Strat. They're very rare. It was one of the first Fender custom shop guitars built. So if you want to find out more, go to the Facebook post. You'll see a picture of it, or I think you'll put it up on Instagram as well, right?
It'll be on Instagram too.
Yeah, go check it out. And on with the show.
Hi, this is Sean Meehan.
This is Braden Williams,
and you're listening to
The Psychology
of Lickage.
Okay, well, a lot of questions we're starting to ask guitar players is, how did it all start for you? Where, how old were you? What was that experience like? Tell us a bit about how it started in your childhood and guitar playing and all that stuff. Talk about that for a bit.
For sure. So where it started for me was essentially in Winnipeg. I was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and my father played guitar. And he was already up and running doing cover bands and stuff by the time I kind of had an interest in it. So there was always music around, probably from the time I was born, the time I came out of the chute, so to speak. Yeah. And, he was a pretty good guitar player, even still. Like, I don't know if you remember the Guess Who. There was a fellow by the name of Bill Wallace, and he was a bass player in the Guess Who, and he had a band, and my dad was the lead guitar player for his band.
Oh, cool!
That's awesome.
Right off the bat. So when my dad was 17 years old, that's what he did.
Yeah,
and then he went to different types of top 40 bands after that. So that was a huge, huge influence on me. He kind of knew music really well, in the sense of, like, his heroes were Chet Atkins and Lenny Breau and guys like that, And so I was just like, I didn't really get it, man. I didn't really get, I for the longest time I was like, Chet Atkins. Yeah, I was listening to Randy Rhoads and Eddie Van Halen and Rick Emmett and all this stuff. So, but then I realized, oh my God, I missed a part of it. And then by the time I was 15, I figured out, okay, I got to go and reinvestigate all this fingerstyle stuff. And the lead stuff is great, but you got to have that. You should have some kind of foundation in fingerstyle playing as well. Mm-hmm. Because it sounds good just as a solo guitaring thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
the one thing I noticed, Russ, when I first started hanging out with you, I knew right away that you were influenced by Lenny Breau. So it's kind of neat to hear this story.
No.
You know why I knew? You know why I knew? You know what I knew?
Okay.
That goddamn impossible right-hand technique that he does with the harmonics.
Oh. Yeah.
He's got one finger. I went,
that's so hard to do.
He's totally into Lenny Breau. Oh, Jesus.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I kind of really, I try to keep any comparison to Lenny Breau off my radar. Just because, like, if anybody investigates who Lenny Breau is, and the monster that he was, I shy away from any comparison to this guy. I can play fingerstyle. Yeah, I can play a few techniques like Lenny Breau. Yeah, I've played some of his arrangements. I've done a few things, but man, he's way beyond he's still an alien. You know what I mean? He's still an alien, like like how Alan Holdsworth is an alien. You know,
Absolutely.
nobody will ever be these guys. They were a once in a lifetime experience for everyone to enjoy now.
Yeah.
You know, and I shy away from any comparison to those guys. You know, I'm working on a Chet Atkins piece, right? Well, not a Chet Atkins piece. Chet Atkins did it. It's a Spanish piece that he did. And, you know, man, the level of difficulty is just insane. And all that stuff is just so hard to play. So, you know.
What I find.
Well, I don't know. Go ahead.
I was gonna say what I find with those guys is they just learn like 3 licks and they just move on because it's like the rest of it's just untouchable.
Learn their best 3 licks and move on to the next one. Yeah. Well, you know, going back to Lenny Bro, it's nice to touch on him because I always love paying tribute to him because you know he is like I remember having a chat. This is how I sum up Lenny Bro. I remember I had a chat in college. I was going to music school in Toronto, and we were chatting about different things. And Lenny Bro came up, and we were talking about. Actually, before that, we talked about. You know, I don't think the guitar can be mastered. You know, we had this philosophical chat because there's too many variations, there's too many options. But if anybody ever came close, if anybody on this earth throughout history ever came close to mastering that bloody instrument, the guitar, is Lenny Bro.
Yeah.
I think if anybody came close, it was him,
I agree.
Yeah.
Because you know it's beyond his techniques and all that. Like it's more about his concepts and how he brought all those styles together and, like you say, mastered them all. You know, that is the craziest thing I can't get my head around. It's like how were you able to meld all these styles together and then play the best jazz in the world and the best flamenco in the world, and you know, but it's inspiring and I love it. It's just kind of how the same way Eric Johnson does his thing, he masters a lot of his styles too, you know, and it's just freaky, dude. Freaky.
Well, there's different levels of guitar playing. There's you know, when it comes to professional, there's the guys that are just competent enough to play on gigs and play cover gigs. And then there's the guys that at the next level that have sort of dialed in a sound, you know, like Billy Gibbons or Hendrix or, you know, dial it in. And then the pyramid gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And there's a handful of guys right at the top that are just we're and I think us guitar players, what we do is as the commoner goes, oh, I love Hendrix or I love you know, Billy Gibbons or whatever. As pro guitar players, we go beyond that and go, we have to reach higher and go, no, we idolize these guys, you know, Lenny Bro and Eric Johnson. And so there's, and the reason why I bring this up is kind of a psychological aspect to all of this, right? It's like, you know, so when you get I know exactly how you feel. Whenever, like, I just complimented you, and right away you went, "Oh no, what are you talking about? Don't do that." And that happens to me too, where you go, "Oh man, let me playing it." I go because I'm constantly listening to those players. So you know, the Eric Johnsons, and I'm on an Eric Johnson kick right now, or whoever that's in that top of that pyramid. And so you're constantly comparing yourself to these guys, and it makes you feel like you suck, and it makes you feel like, oh my god, like, I need another 50 years just to figure this out, or whatever.
It totally does feel like that.
Right?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
But I think at the same time you lose perspective, and compliment alert here, Russ.
Okay.
I mean, I would consider you like one of the top sort of proficient studio live, you know, guitar players in our country, if not around the world. So yeah, for sure, man. Oh, Well, you know, well, there's a thing, right? You're seeing others, what you see in yourself, and you saw in the way you describe, you know, Lenny and all these things. You're kind of that same kind of player. You're very proficient in a lot of different styles. You can walk into any situation, metal, jazz, blues, and that's hard to find, I think, in contemporary players. I think that's rare. So, yeah.
So being that in my household there was a guy that understood, you know, like my dad understood, like, really sort of, I guess, complex music. You know, he was into jazz and he was so huge influence. And so I just kind of picked it up over the years and just kept trying. And by the time I was 15, I started to get back into Chet Atkins and I understood how the power of that and the Lenny Bro arrangements and things like that. So that really helped. And, you know, I was in high school bands. I was in top 40 bands. I was in original bands right from the very beginning when I first started to go to elementary school and high school. So all through those years, I played in the in the high school bands, and then I made up my own groups, playing covers or whatever. I think the very first song I ever played was "Parasite" by Kiss. That was my very first one. So that riff is pretty cool. And I couldn't believe I was playing it. I was like, wow, I can play this? So I don't know what else you want to know from my past, really, how far and how, what's the timeline,
Well, we'll get into that later, but you touched on something that's really cool and I've asked this question to a few other people is was there a moment, well, maybe for you there wasn't because it's been there in your whole life, but was there a sort of a turning point, a moment where you played a riff or you did something and you went, oh yeah, I'm doing this the rest of my life. This is what I'm doing. I'm not going to do anything else but get right into guitar playing. Was there a moment for you?
I'm not sure. I just kind of was just always inspired because, my dad was kind of not hard on me about practicing, but, he would always remind me, you're never going to get anywhere if you don't practice, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it. But, of course, things were dividing quickly as I grew up because there was so much cool rock and soloing at the time. Like I said, I mentioned the Randy Rhoads, Eddie Van Halen. I would just hear these solos and freak out. I was just like, I got to learn how to play this. So I guess that kind of cemented my trajectory in that way. Was hearing these things, especially like Eruption and Rush, that band,
of course,
moving pictures at the time, also my biggest, my earlier influence was like Aerosmith and let's see what else, a little bit of Led Zeppelin, so I was kind of in that rock vein for a really long time. And of course, my dad was a jazzer, right? So I would hear these things, like Barney Kessel and things like that, and I'd go, not so hot, But I hear a guy like Pat Thrall, for instance, and I go, yeah, man, that sounds awesome. I want to play like that, So there was that divide real quick, trying to be independent and have my own sound and get my own things together. And I hope that satisfies the question somewhat.
Oh, it definitely does.
Sure.
Because you're it's funny. You and I basically kind of grew up in the same generation of guitar playing, and I remember that too. I remember. I didn't discover. This is interesting. This ties into Braden. Braden's about half our age, and he's more influenced, I would say, from the 70s guys. The Zeppelins and the blues and all that stuff more than we are. Because I remember that. I remember that attitude. When I was discovering Eddie Van Halen, Randy Rhoads, all these guys, there was this attitude against Led Zeppelin. They were considered dinosaurs, and there was this they can't play. You have to be fast and shiny if otherwise you're not good. And me too. I went into music school. And then I discovered Barney Kessel, and I went, "What the hell is this?" But then I learned to love him near the end. So it's really weird. As you get older, you go, "Oh, I get it now." It's just him. So I find it fascinating with Braden, for example. He's like 20 years old, and he gets that already. I don't know if it's his generation. What do you think, Braden? Do you think like there's looking at Russ and I?
Yeah, there's definitely an aspect of my dad, because I kind of lived life through the lens of my dad through the first 10 years or so. So everything he listened to, I would listen to. And what I found kind of interesting, though, is as I started to listen to what other people listen to and all that kind of stuff, I found there was a lot of inspiration from the 70s stuff, like that Greta Van Fleet band. It's literally exactly Led Zeppelin. You wouldn't have heard that in the 90s or the 80s or whatever. Like it would have been totally different. So there must be some kind of thing where it's all coming back. Maybe people are living more like me, like through the lens of their parents. I don't really know, but yeah, it's interesting.
Well, you guys have both touched on something that's really interesting. There seems to be a common thread as we interview more people, especially guitar players.
Yeah.
They always mention their dad.
Yeah.
And in your case, Russ, it's very extreme. I didn't know. I knew your dad played guitar. You'd mentioned that a couple, but I didn't know he was that, that proficient or that experienced. Or
trust me, he is wicked like he's got a really good right hand. As far still to this day, he can play a lot of Chet Atkins arrangements, and I can't play any of that stuff, man. He's got this. He's got his Merle Travis doom down, dude, and he can play melodies on top, and he sounds great. You know what I mean? Even for a 76-year-old man now. So
do you find that you're? I mean, obviously, you probably had teen years where you rebelled a little bit, or in your 20s.
Oh yeah.
But do you find he was he's the reason why you play? Like, do you find?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely, 100%, man. Like, you know, I had what did I have when I didn't even have guitars? I had a violin with no strings. You know, I had a Hot Wheels thing, you know, that I tied a cord around it and I plugged it into an amp. You know, it was like a Hot Wheels track. You know, I thought it was a guitar. You know what I mean? So I was down, man. I was down from the first moment. And then for sure, that's his influence and being around, you know, amplifiers. When you see an amplifier as a kid, dude, you want to touch, you know, you want to get into it. Like, oh my God, what is this thing? Awesome.
I'm still experiencing that. I'm still buying and selling amps.
Me too, man. Crazy.
Was your dad... was he touring a lot? Was he around a lot? Was he just like, what was that experience?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think he had a lot of in-town gigs, you know, and he had the odd out-of-town gig, but, you know, it wasn't that point to where he was like touring across the country or anything like that. So he was kind of always around, and you know, his influence was there most of the time.
That's cool,
so,
man.
Yeah,
That's really, really cool.
Yeah, it wasn't at that level where he's away for months or anything like that. No.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't know if you guys have heard of the book The Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, I think it is. And he basically, he's kind of a scientific journalist, and he likes to look at the success of things, and then he analyzes it, and you know, and he talks about the 10,000 hours, right? He takes 10,000 hours to be proficient or master anything, and so, but a lot of times too, not only does it take 10,000 hours, but it takes certain circumstances to happen to you when you're young. So Russ, I don't think you'd be the guitar player you are if it wasn't for the fact that your dad, you know, had you not had a dad like that, let's say you had a dad who was an accountant, you may
absolutely.
not be the guitar player you are, right? You may have been a guitar player still, but so that's
for sure.
You know, so that's a bit of a lucky break in a way. You know what I mean? It's a bit of a circumstantial situation.
Very much so. And I'm very grateful for that situation as well, you know?
Yeah, and then you ran with it.
It's been a great thing. Yeah. For sure.
I mean, he can only take you so far, and you walked through the door, ran through the door, in my opinion, and then just sort of built it beyond that, just kept going.
That's right. So, you know, you kind of wanted to get out of that phase where he's always like on your back about practicing and stuff. You know what I mean? It's like, you'll never get anywhere with it if you don't practice. It's like, okay, can you play this? And he's like, no, I can't play that. And I was like, okay, now it's time to get off my back now, you know?
Well, one thing we talked about, I think, in the pilot episode, or one of the two first episodes, is we talked about we don't believe that, you know, how people, I think that's the music selling machine likes to use words like, you know, prodigy and you know, effortlessness, and, you know, whatever, when they're trying to sell a player. But we believe that everybody who's great, no matter who it is, had to have a woodshed period. You know, did you have one and then it sort of kind of keeled out, or do you still go through woodshed period? I suspect you still woodshed from time to time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So I remember my first kind of experiences like that was when I was about 11 years old, and I figured out that if I actually applied myself with practice, I got better. Who knew?
What a concept!
I know, isn't that crazy? So, so that being that I saw that and then started to play different things, and then got advanced, kind of, I guess, semi early in my development as far as, like, you know, playing Chet Atkins arrangements and things like that. Like, I did actually get to the point where, you know, I was playing stuff that in my town in Saskatoon, like, we had moved from Winnipeg to Edmonton to Saskatoon, and by the time I got there, you know, I was proficient, you know, and technique wise, I was proficient. So, you know, I kind of probably skipped a lot of steps in there, but but yeah, by the time I was 11, I realized that if I practiced, I'd get better. And I also want to mention as well, my dad is such a huge influence that he also influenced my brother, who's also got some technique and can play as well. He's very good. Yeah, and he's got his own thing going. He plays a lot of top 40 as a single act now, but he's had bands in the past, and he still probably has all those things. But yeah, just, you know, like it has a big resonance in our family for sure.
That's awesome.
That's really cool.
So I'd just like to shout out to my brother Chris, because I know that I know he may feel possibly eclipsed sometimes. You know what I mean? And so he needs some light in there as well every once in a while. So I'll definitely shout out to him and tell him that he's doing a great job, or he's done a great job with his playing and all that. Up till now, for sure.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, going back to sort of woodshedding and practicing, I remember I've seen these sort of little, what do you call them, memes? I don't know, these little
memes.
Memes. There you go. And it kind of makes fun of the whole, oh, you're so talented. You know, I wish I could play like that. I practice. Oh, I can't believe how good I practice. You know, you're kind of like, shut up. Just pick up the damn guitar, quit making excuses, and play it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's an input output instrument, right? The more you put in, the more you get out. Yeah. It's really simple, but it really is, if you buckle down on it and just keep your head down on it, it'll work out, man. It'll work out.
Well, I agree with you. I agree. I always say, if you're not becoming good at something, or you're not accomplishing something, you don't want it bad enough. It's that simple. You don't. Well, I can't. Well, you just don't want to. You don't want. It's not. You would rather play video games, or you would rather go on your bike, or whatever. You know, I'm sort of reference to students, because I think they need to hear this stuff. It's part of the reason why I backed out of teaching, because I would get so frustrated. I'd be like, we're doing the same lesson over and over again, and then they go, oh, I didn't have time, and I said, okay, well, how many hours of video games did you play? How many hours did you spend with your friends this week? Find the time.
Sure, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, it's an energy thing. Like, how much energy do you want to put into this, right?
Yeah,
and how much energy do you want to put into other things?
And that's okay. That's okay. Like, if you don't want to become a great guitar player, that's fine. But quit coming to my lessons then. Like, you know, like, just don't lie to yourself and go do something else. But anyways.
Okay, so recently I also became a percussionist. Yes.
Interesting.
I know. Isn't this weird? Okay, so that's kind of the things I wanted to mention. Maybe it's more recent history. Yeah. But okay, so in order to fill my gaps at times with the music thing, because it hasn't always been as strong as I would like it. Yeah. So I basically got a job at a cannabis dispensary. I don't know if I mentioned that.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Okay, so there's two more things that I didn't mention that probably aren't on my bio at all. So I became 2 years or 3 years ago, I became a processing clerk for this place called the Medicinal Cannabis Dispensary. And if you want to keep this in there, you can keep this in there. Shout out to those guys. You know, they've recently been hit. You know, just like every business has been hit in Canada, and I just recently got laid off from that job. So, but it's been a great experience, and it helped me balance the whole situation with not having to play covers as much and things like that, right? So it filled that gap. And then on the other side of the things, I also got a job playing percussion for dance classes for this place called Shadbolt Center of the Arts. Yeah. So shout out to those guys. And also Victor Noriega, who got me that job, who's an awesome keyboard player and in Vancouver, local guy, jazz keyboard player. And so, like I was saying, the idea was to kind of balance it all out so I could now attack the original side of my career or whatever. So So that basically transpired in the last couple of years. So
this is very interesting. You touched on something really interesting. It's part of the reason why I got out of covers is in the earlier part of my career, I did a lot of cover stuff. I was in cover bands all over the place, toured a lot. I would go up 6 weeks up north and did covers all the time. And I forced myself to get out of it because I didn't mind it. Actually, it was fun. I mean,
of course,
playing music is always better than any job.
You bet. Yeah,
but there's a certain comfort to it that I for me, not for everyone, but for me, there's a certain thing to it that it made me lazy on the original side. Because here's the thing: like, I just love music, and it has to be a part of my life. If I'm not playing music some way or another, then I go in bananas. So what I did was, it was kind of a psychological thing I did. I pulled away from it. So it forced me to, the only way I'm going to get to play again is I got to play originals. And so I would going bananas, not gigging enough. I'd force myself to write songs. I'd force myself to chase guys like you down to write songs and that sort of thing. So it's interesting that you kind of said the same thing in a way where you're going, okay, well, now that I want to go more into original stuff, I'm going to pull back from playing. Is that part of the reason for you? Like, I'm going to pull back from playing covers. I'm going to just focus on are you pulling back for that reason as well? Just to sort of get away from covers and just be an artist? For sure.
Like I said, with the students, it's like, where do you want to spend your energy, right? Do you want to spend your energy doing this, or do you want to spend your energy doing that? So the more energy you put into your own thing, hopefully will, give you back that input that you put out there, or that you put into it. What you'll get out, what you put in. Right.
Exactly.
And let's face it, being an artist, being a recording artist, is a very, very energy consuming, difficult task. It's not, let's be clear about that. It's one thing to start a band and join a cover band. That takes effort too. But an original thing, there's a lot of other struggles that come into play as soon as you make that decision.
And I bet you know all of them.
Oh, I know them too well. Let's just say I've gone through wives. I've gone.
Oh my Lord!
You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. Home Alone. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's. You're right. This is a really interesting topic because I don't think a lot of people realize, especially people that are not in the music business, how much energy it takes and focus just to try to get one song out there, try to get, try to get 10,000 people to watch your video, or try to get a song on the radio, or like you said, try to get a record deal. Like, I'm sure when you got that Warner Brother record deal, I doubt you were doing anything else but just being in an original band, starving, writing music, making connections, and getting that deal. So,
Correct.
Yeah. So let's go back to that. Going way back to the. Tell me about that period. Were you guys all living in a basement, starving?
Well, okay. So shout out to my friend Dan Kerslake, who actually kind of inspired me to start to, he helped me get the deal with Warner Music, actually, because he was inspired by the stuff that I was writing at the time, and it was working out. And I remember the very first inception of it was, I was listening to all this stuff, the Nirvana, the Soundgarden, Ministry. Ministry was a big, huge influence. There was all kinds of great groups at the time, and it kind of flipped from the 80s kind of quote unquote hair metal, right, to this little more, I guess, soulful, or just kind of Led Zeppelin-y, Black Sabbath cross almost at the time. And I was, that was my favorite, right? Like Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin. Oh, geez. You couldn't ask for a better time for me to write music at that time, because I love those bands. And then there was also this kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but there's also a twist on the whole thing, right? Like, it didn't have to be like that. It didn't have to be that dirgy, grungy stuff. It could have been whatever you wanted. It seemed like the music business opened up for a second, and you were able to kind of express whatever kind of rock you wanted to express, and it was accepted, right?
Yeah, so that's the cool thing about that period. It's like it turned upside down for a few years.
Yeah,
right? Like,
man.
Whereas all the rules went out the window, and then suddenly the big executives were signing anything that wasn't pop or anything that wasn't conventional, right?
That's it. Yeah, they were all over it, and we were part of that wave. Like, if we didn't sound like that, then we wouldn't have got signed, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good. The right sound at the right time.
That's it.
Yeah,
that's it. And I was so green and so young. I didn't really know how to take all that power and focus it, at the time, because I was like surprised that we even made it. You know what I mean? I was like, what?
We're on Warner Brothers. That's Van label.
Yeah. I mean, it was Warner Canada.
Still.
Yeah. Shout out to all those people who worked on that. That was great.
The cool thing about the world now is that now you can take all those decades of experience, all those lessons you've learned, go back with that to the original business, the original music business. And the cool thing is now is that it seems now more than ever that there's not as much, I don't know what to call it, ageism, or it doesn't seem to really matter nowadays. As long as what you find a niche and you do it well, you can figure it out. That's the cool thing about the internet. That's the cool thing about sort of, I think, how the world has changed and evolved since that time period. And so this is probably a great time for you to be digging back into original music.
Right? I think so. I think people's ears are open a little bit more, maybe. Mm-hmm. So after the Salvador Dream period, I think, we realized that we weren't very good at holding down our own business. We kind of needed people around us to keep it afloat and things like that. And then the styles changed right away. I remember seeing, the death of Kurt Cobain on television and things like that. And and then my manager phoned me and was like, I think what you're doing is over now, kind of. So the whole rock thing switched over to Chemical Brothers and Prodigy.
Nope, I think we lost him again.
And it had a bad vibe to it, like all those bands, Pearl Jam. Everybody kind of shied away from that style now because it had such a dark connotation. Like this guy, shot himself in the head and all this. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
It was a really tumultuous kind of situation for people that were loving that music. And of course, they just needed time to heal and then just realize it was just a great period in rock and roll history and whatever. So I don't know where I was going with that.
No, it's all good. We're talking about we're all over the place. We're kind of talking about, that's the cool thing about a podcast is it's just open discussion, and it's here to entertain people and maybe give them a little insight if we're lucky. But you touched on some really cool stuff. Is being an artist, there's this challenge when it comes to being an artist and trying to make a living at it. And I think you guys did it, maybe didn't realize you did it, is you have to have this balance between thinking like a business person a little bit and going, okay, look, what are we? What kind of band are we? And how are we going to fit into the marketplace? You have to have some of that. And then, but at the same time, not lose perspective and still bring lots of art to the table and be yourself. And that's always the challenge, isn't it? It's that balance between business and art is very, very challenging.
I agree very much with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I find, I don't know about you, Russ, but I find it very difficult to balance it because I'm either all business or I'm either all art, and I can't find it. You know what I mean? It's like, screw it.
I think, well, within that, I think you got a really good handle on it because, you definitely got your promo together and things like that, and I definitely know who Mia May is just by reading my Facebook feed and all that. So you're doing a great job, man. Trust me, you got it together, bro.
Thanks,
you've always had that edge, and you've always done really well with your music and your guitar playing. So I'll give you props for that, man.
Yeah, I've dialed
in
my
songwriting too, and your songwriting.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think if songwriting has really evolved over the years, which is why recently I'm going to expand more into writing with 4 other people now. I've always taken this approach where I've gone to people like you to help me write for my band, and I learned a lot. From. I'm very grateful. As a songwriter, my favorite period, I'm grateful for the period I had under John Dexter, and you were a big part of that. During that sort of, I think it was a few years, I was literally starving. I was literally had no job. My wife was sort of helping me pay the rent. I lost my van. I basically just went for it, and I was running around 5 days a week. I was at your place one day, then I was at I was at Ryan Stewart's the other day. Then I go hang out with John. Then I go hang out with basically all these writers. That was a really good time because I learned so much about writing that's starting to click now.
Right
really,
on.
a decade later, I went, oh yeah, like because songwriting is such an intangible art. You know what I mean by that? It's such guitar is a little more tangible. I find guitar is, you want to sound like a certain guy, you go online, go YouTube, learn it, go play some gigs. There is some intangible. I think the difference between a good player and a great player is in the intangible. You know what I mean? Is in the unspoken, is in the, like when you talked about Lenny Bro. But I think songwriting is almost all intangible. It's so bloody.
Right.
How do you teach it? How do you learn it? I mean,
I don't know.
There's no formula.
I watched I watched the Taylor Swift documentary last night. Yeah. And honestly, I didn't really like Taylor Swift's music, but I really like what she's doing now because she decided that she was going to write for herself and be an artist and not have to have the restriction of being pigeonholed into whatever she was being pigeonholed at the time. So. Yeah. And she's done the same thing. She's reaching out to different producers and having a different sound. But I think she's writing better material. And you know what? I'll actually check it if you can believe that. You know what I mean? I watched it and I enjoyed her little story, even though it was kind of more sort of self promotion in a way. It definitely was. Hey, my career. It seemed like my career is failing, so I got to put out a video like Beyonce, or something like that. Right. That's kind of the way it seemed. But hey, good for her for actually having the creativity to write better music now. So you take all that experience and now she's writing better. And absolutely. Writing about more things that matter to, like, say, an older person like me. How did I come to respect Taylor Swift? When I didn't really before. So for her. Yeah.
Touch on something too. Like I think to be a great writer, you have to be open, like what you're doing right now, what you're talking about right now. Is you have to be like, I remember once. Believe it or not, you're going to laugh at me because I know you're probably a huge Tool fan. And I was
not so big. I do respect them. I do respect them, and I do think they're a good band. But they kind of.
Well, it's funny. I was hanging out with John, of all people, and I didn't think he'd be a Tool fan, right? John Dexter, and we're chatting away, and I kind of started dissing them, and he proverbially slapped me in the face, and he literally went, he went, they are number one right now. Stop talking, and I went, oh yeah, and what that lesson taught me was keep an open mind to everything. If somebody's nailing it, whether you hate it or not, figure out why they're nailing it. They can keep an open mind to it, right?
Guess what? I missed that whole thing. I think you went on, and I ducked out on my internet for like 2 minutes there.
Hey, don't worry about us. We already recorded
with Tool. You started with Tool. You started with Tool, and basically you said, asked me if I was a Tool fan, and all I was going to say was, yes, I respect their songwriting and talents and everything, and their musicianship, but they kind of regurgitated a little bit on the last record.
Well, what I was elaborating was, my point is to keep an open mind to all styles of music, whether you like them or not, especially if you want to become a professional writer. And so I was just saying that John had really kind of taught me a lesson. John Dexter, I was chatting with him, and I was kind of dissing them a little bit, and he right away he stopped me in my tracks. And I think at the time they were in the top 10 or they were number one or something, and he just said, "Stop talking. They're number one. It doesn't matter what you think about them." And now he's talking to me as a professional writer, trying to teach me a thing or two, right? From that moment on, man, I kept an open mind. I didn't even if something didn't rock my world and I couldn't get into it, I would at least go, why are people reacting to this? What is it about this? Even though I can't stand it, but there's 3 million people downloading the song.
Exactly.
Again, that's sort of a psychological perspective. You have to get behind the psychology of it. You have to go, okay, what are those people thinking? Why are they reacting? How old are they? What is it? And it really opened my eyes, because I've never been a lyric guy, for example. I've never I just went, whatever, lyrics or whatever, as long as you got great melodies. But then no, lyrics are actually really important, especially to people that are musicians. Right?
For sure. Yeah.
And there's more non-musicians than are musicians out there that are going to hopefully buy our songs, right? So anyways, I was just sort of touching on that, where you had this open mind, your mind is opening up to Taylor Swift, And I think that kind of thinking really helps you become a better artist. At least I think so. That's my 2 cents.
And on the other side of it, yeah, I watched the Taylor Swift, but you know what I really watch is guitar videos all day, every day. Right?
Yeah, me too, buddy.
Let's say this. Okay, George Benson, John McLaughlin, Rick Graham. Yeah. I want to say that this is what's been occupying my time for real. You know, you're talking about the psychology of lickage.
Yeah,
dude.
Yeah.
I'm so far. Let's just say I'm so far up John McLaughlin's ass. He probably can't pull me out now.
Well, you touch on something. Like I said earlier, you're an in-demand studio guy, touring guy. And it's not just because you're a nice guy and easy to work with. And it's also because you do this sort of shit. You treat guitar playing like a lot of this is kind of appropriate for the times, like high-end doctors. What do high-end? If you take you can talk to any 60-year-old or more doctor, and they never stop learning. They're constantly going back to school. They're constantly and I think you treat guitar playing that way. You're constantly going back to school. You're constantly going, oh man, I'm gonna upgrade this, upgrade that. So there you go.
True.
There you go, kids. If you want to learn to play like Russ, you got to go watch the videos all day.
Check it out. Scott Henderson, Barry Green.
Oh yeah.
Cecil Alexander. Find him.
I'm taking notes.
Man, there's so many guys. Like if anybody wants to hit me up for what I check, I'll definitely give them a list of guys that they should look at. Get their instructional video and check it out.
Braden, do you have a question or anything you want
to? Mostly just an observation. What I found was kind of interesting with your relationship with your father was how you didn't you found the Chet Atkins stuff like boring and all that kind of stuff. Was that kind of a little bit of a rebellious attitude towards what he wanted to do?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, because the energy that the rock players had was just out of this world. You know. And then when you check somebody like Chet Atkins, it's kind of subdued and it's kind of subtle, and it doesn't really have that aggression to it or whatever, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's missing that part. And when you're young, dude, of course that's all you want to. You just want to.
You just want that shot of dopamine when you learn the song.
What I would say at the time, girls were a thing, and it's like that's what You're a young man with a guitar.
Exactly.
What else?
And your options have opened up for you.
Yeah, you see what I mean? And if you keep playing it, you'll see that it might, it has this effect on certain people and whatever. So we'll just say that. And by the way, sorry, my dad's name is Joseph. So just so anybody, Joseph Klyne. And my brother's name is Chris Klyne. So if you ever want to investigate any of those, my dad's not an online kind of guy, but my brother sure is. So
okay, cool. We'll be sure to put a shout out as well in the show.
Yeah
right on.
Sure. Yeah, right on. Yeah, no, this is it's I love these that's why we started this. Obviously, the timing is good because people that we normally wouldn't be able to track down, we can.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they're even a guy like you'd be hard to track down if there was no quarantine. I know that because you're always. I was going to ask you what's been keeping your time? What have you been doing the last few years? What are you doing mostly of?
Yeah. Okay. So I figured out that a couple of years ago, I think. Was my 30th year in coming to Vancouver from Edmonton, where I went and I studied at Grant MacEwan, and I got my diploma of music at Grant MacEwan in performance. No, was it performance? No, it was general music. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I came here from Edmonton, and it had been 30 years, and so I kind of looked at my history. Back in the history of what I've been doing for the last 30 years. And I figured out that it was, mostly covers and music for other people, right? Mostly.
Yeah.
There's some gaps where I had my own band and I got signed, Salvador Dream, and then the following group with the same members adding a member, Brad Turner on keyboards and Chris Gesturin at times as name dropper. So an instrumental band. But the Salvador Dream Band was a rock band, and it came at the time where the term was grunge, right? So we got signed to Warner in 91 or 92, something like that.
Yeah.
And then I just realized over the 30 years that I had been doing a lot of things for other people, and rightly so, and it's been a great experience, and I'm grateful, very grateful for all those experiences. Chaos, Nelly Furtado, Alfie Zappacosta, Mike Reno, Biff Naked, all kinds of artists that I worked with over the time. I'm probably missing a bunch. A lot of independent artists, a lot of just people who wanted me on their records and things like that.
Yeah.
And it's been, the Rascals, shout out to the Rascals, all kinds of situations and different types of music. And I just kind of wanted to reel that back in a little bit for me and start kind of more cherry picking my gigs a little bit and doing stuff for myself and putting it back into original music. And so I was really excited before this whole thing started with the thing I'm not supposed to mention.
Pandemic. Go ahead, say it.
Okay.
Pandemic.
I was really excited. Because I was paying off all my bills, and I was going to have budget to put back into myself and start promoting myself as in a group or as a solo artist or whatever I wanted to do musically. I was going to promote that a little heavier and get that ball rolling. And so I would say I was working on that concept, let's just say, and playing a few gigs already. And I'd been playing and jamming with my favorite people along the way on the underground tip, and then doing top 40 gigs on the side. And then practicing, and then, just living the life of a musician, basically,
Please keep do you have, going back to sort of what you want to do now or what you're looking at doing, do you have a particular focus yet, or are you still trying to figure that out? Like, do you want to do a solo instrumental album, or is it more of a band thing?
I always liked being in a band. And the solo thing, you really have to have your repertoire together. And I notice, let's say with my brother, he is a master at learning all the songs that people want to hear in his area and his community and stuff. And they want to hear rock songs, and they want to hear country songs, and all off of the radio and things that people have heard before. And that's great. But I was completely sort of going into the phase where it's like I wanted to kind of be an artist, and just create art on that level. And like my focus was guitar instrumental, let's say rock fusion instrumental. That's kind of so I get with guys, Jeff Gammon, Sam Cartwright, Ash Pearson, who's a world-class metal drummer. Toby Peter, he's a bass player that played with me in Salvador Dream for the longest time. We've known each other for years and years. So I was just trying to, and Brad Turner is another guy. So I was just trying to combine my community or my local guys and just stay on that track for as long as I could stay on it. And so I tend to do that when this wave of whatever is over.
Well, now is a great time. Now is really a good time to, I'm sure this is what you're doing. You're probably spending a lot of time in front of your computer, in front of your studio with your guitar in your hand going, okay, let's write another song. And I'm sure this is probably a pretty big creative phase for you right now.
Well, yeah, I definitely am trying to sink my teeth into things, but I've kind of already had all the stuff written even actually before I sort of decided that I wanted to do it, right? Like I had done a few shows already, but I didn't quite promote them as I could have, but it's been fun and it's been great.
Well, when you do have something to release and ready to go, we'd love to have you back on, and
awesome.
And we'll promote it, and yeah, man.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a great chat. I mean, that could have,
really cool.
I think, what was that, 45 minutes?
Yeah, we could have gone on for hours, though.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I spend a lot of time with Russ. He's I've had the good fortune of hanging out in his studio and writing songs and picking his brain, and he's just a monster player. You'd never know it though, hanging out with him. He's just such a humble guy.
Yeah.
You know, but
I could
what
tell.
did you take from this?
Yeah, I could tell just talking to him. He sounded really humble. Like, I haven't met him, but it makes me want to meet him even more.
Oh yeah. Oh, you got to meet this guy. He really is one of the first guys you call in Canada. I mean, he's toured the world with Nelly Furtado. I don't have the list in front of me, but just a list of just well-established artists. He's played so much studio work over the last 25 years. And I think that's a topic we can touch on. I think it's a combination of things why he gets the first call a lot of times is because not only is he a great player, he's a flexible player, he's an all-around player, which we'll get into in a minute, but he's also a great guy, and he's really easy to work with, and that is really important.
It is.
Really. That's almost more important, you know?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You know, so... Yeah, so what did you take from this? What did you like, you know?
Well, I thought the whole, like, the aspect about him, you know, his dad always played instruments, and it was kind of interesting because his dad was super strict in the way that he learned instruments, which is quite opposite from a lot of other parents. Like, I know my parents were very lenient, and it was like, if you're serious, then we'll get you this, but there's no pressure, just practice when you want to. Whereas with his dad and his parents, it was quite the opposite. It was like, oh, you got to get this good to be this good,
Yeah, I'm always torn. That's a good observation, Braden, because I'm always torn between that, I'm torn between what is the best approach. Is it with a child? Is it pushing the heck out of them? Because I've seen people my family's in the hockey world, and there's been some successful hockey players, and I've seen some people go all the way and they weren't pushed at all. My brother wasn't pushed at all, nobody, and yet, and he went pretty far, and then some others were pushed really hard and they went far too. And so it's
well, I think
maybe both work depending on the person. Maybe it has a lot to do with the person, because you're right. I think Russ is a combination of growing up in a family of musicians, so it's kind of everything. It's all he knows. It's not that he knows, but it's what he grew up in. But you could tell when he was chatting, his dad is still in the room sometimes. His dad's still pushing him to be great. And he is great. I mean, as a result of it, he is great. So that was really interesting. That's what I got from it from a psychological point of view was that angle. So yeah, me too. I wasn't really pushed. I was basically, in fact, my mom sometimes, she was supportive generally, but I think sometimes she wasn't she just didn't want to hear the noise, or, it's just like, turn that down or whatever. So it angered me to be better. So who knows? Maybe there really isn't one way to do it.
I think it's a delicate balance. Yeah.
But he's a prime example of there's a book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, I think, and he talks about sort of a lot of the greats are a combination of putting in their 10,000 hours, but also kind of having a leg up on things as well, kind of having opportunities as a child that the average person wouldn't get. Like, for example, Bill Gates, he was given a computer when there wasn't computers when he was a kid. So he had a leg up a little bit. And I think Russ had a leg up by being in a musical family and having a strict dad, that opened the gate, but he ultimately followed through, right? He could have, so it's a combination of following through and then having these early opportunities that open the doors,
Yeah.
I can't say enough great things about this guy. I mean, I've had the honor of hanging out with him, and I look forward to doing it again. And go check him out.
Yeah.
Russ Klyne. You can find him on Facebook. I think we're gonna have him back if he'll come back. We'll have him back to promote some new music that he's gonna be working on that he talked about in the show. So
yeah.
There
we go.
Thanks for checking in, everybody. Thanks for supporting us. And hey, go to the contest. We have a very cool contest right now. All you gotta do is like and share our post on Facebook for a free T-shirt from the Guitar Repair Center. Go to our websites. You can go to my website, meehanmusic.com.
And BradenWilliams.ca.
Absolutely. And check out our vintage and rare guitars for Guitar of the Week. And thank you so much for
thank you.
checking in. And stay tuned. There'll be another one next week.